I never imagined that my morning kayak trip would turn into a 3-year legal nightmare, but when you live in Oakridge Estates and have Patricia Winters as your HOA president, anything can happen. The day started like any other Sunday calm waters, birds chirping and me enjoying the peaceful flow of the Willamette River behind my property in Eugene, Oregon. My name is Michael Quinn, and I've lived in my riverside home for nearly 15 years. I bought this place specifically for the water access, paying a premium for the property rights that extended to the middle of the river, a fact that would become the centerpiece of the most ridiculous legal battle I've ever experienced. It was early May 2022, and the spring weather was perfect for kayaking. I just pushed off from my private dock when I heard the shrill voice that had become the soundtrack to many neighborhood disputes. "Excuse me, you cannot do that here." Patricia Winters stood at the edge of the communal green space, her platinum blonde bob unmoved by the breeze, clipboard in hand like it was an extension of her arm. She was wearing her standard uniform, beige capri pants, a pastel cardigan, and an expression of perpetual disapproval. I pretended not to hear her, paddling a few more strokes into the river. At 45, I wasn't about to be told I couldn't enjoy my own property by someone whose only qualification was being elected to the Oakridge Estates HOA board by a total of 12 neighbors at a meeting most people avoided attending. "Mr. Quinn, I am speaking to you." Her voice carried across the water with impressive force. "River activities must be approved by the board." I finally turned my kayak to face her. "Patricia, this is my property. The river access is deeded to me. We've been through this." "The aesthetic guidelines clearly state, the aesthetic guidelines don't apply to the river," I interrupted, my patience already wearing thin. "My property line extends to the middle of the Willamette. I checked with the county before buying this house." Patricia's face reddened. "That's not how things work here. The HOA has jurisdiction over all visible areas of the community." I laughed, which was my first mistake. Patricia Winters wasn't someone who took laughter at her expense lightly. "I'm going for my paddle now. Have a nice day." As I turned away, I heard her final threat. "This isn't over, Mr. Quinn." I should have taken her more seriously. Patricia Winters didn't make idle threats. I spent about 2 hours on the river that morning, enjoying the scenery and the gentle exercise. When I returned to my dock, I was surprised to see 2 police cruisers parked in my driveway. As I secured my kayak, an officer approached the dock. "Mr. Quinn, I'm Officer Ramirez with the Eugene Police Department. We received a complaint about trespassing and unauthorized use of community property." I nearly fell into the river from shock. "Trespassing? On my own property?" Officer Ramirez looked uncomfortable. "The complainant is a Miss Winters, representing the Oakridge Estates Homeowners Association. She claims you're using community waterways without permission and violating HOA regulations." I took a deep breath. "Officer, I own this property, including river rights. The HOA has no jurisdiction over the Willamette River. This is a waste of your time, and I suspect Miss Winters knows it." The second officer, who introduced himself as Officer Thompson, asked to see my property deed. Fortunately, I keep important documents organized. I invited them inside and showed them my paperwork, which clearly indicated that my property extended to the middle of the river, a common arrangement for waterfront properties in Oregon. Officer Thompson reviewed the documents and nodded. "This appears to be in order, Mr. Quinn. Your property rights do extend to the middle of the river." I tried to explain that to Miss Winters, I said, relieved that the officers understood. "She's been making similar claims to other riverfront owners." "We'll speak with her," Officer Ramirez said. "Sorry for the disturbance. We have to respond to all complaints, but this one seems unfounded." I watched from my front window as the officers spoke with Patricia across the street. Even from a distance, I could see her gesturing wildly, her face growing increasingly red. When the officers left without taking any action against me, she stood on the sidewalk, staring at my house with a look that made me uncomfortable. The next day, I received an official violation notice from the HOA in my mailbox. It cited unauthorized water activities and improper recreational equipment storage for my kayak, which I kept on my dock. The notice included a $150 fine and a warning that continued violations would result in escalating penalties. I immediately called my friend Thomas Alvarez, who happened to be a real estate attorney. "This is ridiculous, Thomas. They're fining me for using my own property." "Don't pay it," he advised. "Send a certified letter stating your property rights and include a copy of your deed. Make it clear that the HOA has no jurisdiction over the river or your personal dock." I followed his advice, sending a firmly worded letter the next day. A week passed with no response, and I thought perhaps Patricia had finally realized she was overstepping. I was wrong. The following Saturday, I invited a few friends over for a barbecue. We were enjoying burgers on my back deck when Patricia appeared at the edge of my property with two other HOA board members, Barbara Ellis, a retired school administrator with a permanent scowl, and Gerald Thompson, a former insurance adjuster who followed Patricia around like a lost puppy. "Mr. Quinn," Patricia called out, "we need to speak with you about ongoing violations." My friends fell silent as I walked to the edge of my deck. "This is private property, Patricia. You're not invited to this gathering." "We're conducting an official HOA inspection," she replied, holding up her clipboard like it was a badge. "Your continued defiance of community rules cannot be tolerated." "There's nothing to inspect," I said firmly. "My property is in compliance with all legitimate HOA regulations." "The river isn't under your jurisdiction." Barbara stepped forward. "We've consulted with the HOA attorney, Mr. Quinn. Recreational equipment must be stored out of sight. Your kayak is an eyesore from the community green space." I pointed to my deed that I'd laminated and attached to a post at the edge of my property after our last encounter. "My property, my dock, my kayak, not HOA business." Gerald cleared his throat. "There's also the matter of unauthorized guests using the waterway. We observed individuals in your kayak last weekend who aren't residents." This was true. My nephews had visited, and I'd let them take turns in the kayak. "Are you spying on my property now? Community observation is part of our duties," Patricia said smugly. My friend Ryan stepped up beside me. "You're harassing him. We're witnesses to this. If you don't leave private property immediately, we'll call the police." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "That won't be necessary. We've already documented the violations." The three turned and walked away, but Patricia glanced back with a satisfied smile that made my stomach turn. "Man, what's her problem?" Ryan asked as they disappeared around the side of my house. "Power trip," I replied. "She's been going after everyone who doesn't conform to her vision of the perfect neighborhood." Later that evening, after my friends had left, I received an email notification of another violation, this time for $300 for unauthorized guests using community waterways, and an additional $150 for failure to remedy equipment storage violations. The email included photos of my nephews in the kayak, clearly taken with a telephoto lens from across the river. That was when I decided enough was enough. The next morning, I called Thomas again. "They're photographing children on my property now," I told him. "This has gone from annoying to creepy." Thomas sighed. "Let me look into their bylaws and your deed restrictions more carefully. In the meantime, document everything. If they come onto your property again without permission, call the police for trespassing." 2 days later, I was working from home when I heard the sound of a motor on the river. I looked out to see a small pontoon boat with Oakridge Estates, HOA, freshly painted on the side. Patricia was at the helm, with Barbara and a man I didn't recognize taking photos of the riverfront properties. I walked down to my dock. "Patricia, what do you think you're doing?" She turned the boat toward me. "Documenting waterway violations for all riverfront properties. The board has approved regular river patrols." "You have no authority here," I called out. "This isn't HOA property." "We'll see about that." she replied with a confidence that worried me. The boat continued down the river, stopping to photograph each property. That evening, I received an email from the HOA with an attached document titled Amendment to Waterway Usage Regulations. It stated that the board had voted to extend HOA jurisdiction to include all visible portions of the Willamette River adjacent to Oakridge Estates. According to this amendment, any recreational use of the river now required written approval, and a schedule of fees had been established for various activities. I forwarded the email to Thomas. His response came within minutes. They can't do this. The river is state property, with adjacent landowners having specific riparian rights. They're overreaching dramatically. The next day, Thomas sent a cease and desist letter to the HOA board on my behalf, outlining the legal boundaries of their authority and demanding they retract their amendment. Their response was to increase the fines against me to $500 per day for continued willful violations and legal interference with HOA business. The situation escalated when I received a certified letter informing me that the HOA had placed a lien on my property for unpaid fines, now totaling $2,650. This was a serious threat. A lien could affect my ability to refinance or sell my home in the future. Thomas advised me to file a lawsuit against the HOA for harassment, exceeding their authority and filing a fraudulent lien. This is going to get expensive, he warned. But if you don't fight it, they'll keep pushing. I agreed, and we filed the lawsuit in Lane County Circuit Court in June 2022. The initial hearing was set for August, which meant 2 more months of dealing with Patricia's increasing hostility. During those 2 months, things got worse. Patricia organized what she called community monitoring shifts, where board members and their allies would sit in the common area watching riverfront properties. My neighbors and I found ourselves under constant surveillance. One evening in July, I decided to go for a sunset paddle. As I pushed off from my dock, I heard Patricia shouting. She was standing at the edge of the common area with her phone out. "This is a direct violation of the cease and desist order, Mr. Quinn," she yelled. "The HOA attorney will be adding this to our countersuit." There was no cease and desist order against me, only the one I'd sent them. But Patricia had become increasingly disconnected from reality as the conflict wore on. I ignored her and paddled away, but when I returned 30 minutes later, 2 police cruisers were waiting. This time it was Officers Ramirez and Jackson, neither of whom seemed pleased to be there again. "Mr. Quinn," Officer Ramirez said with a sigh, "Miss Winters has reported that you're violating a court order." "There is no court order," I explained, securing my kayak. "We have a pending lawsuit, but no orders have been issued. She's wasting your time again." Officer Jackson nodded. "We figured as much, but we have to respond. Miss Winters has made 7 calls to the department about you in the past month." 7? I was shocked. About what? "Noise violations, improper water usage, suspicious activity, the list goes on," Officer Ramirez said. "None of them have been substantiated." As we were talking, Patricia approached, clipboard in hand. "Officers, I want to press charges for trespassing and violating a legal order." Officer Jackson turned to her. "Miss Winters, there is no legal order on file. Mr. Quinn has provided documentation that he has rights to use the river adjacent to his property. This is the 3rd unfounded complaint you've made this week." Patricia's face flushed. "The HOA has jurisdiction. The HOA does not have jurisdiction over the Willamette River," Officer Jackson interrupted firmly. "That's a state waterway. If you continue to make unfounded reports, you could be cited for misuse of emergency services." For once, Patricia was speechless. She stormed off, and the officers apologized to me before leaving. The August hearing finally arrived. Thomas and I presented our case, complete with documentation of harassment, the fraudulent lien, and evidence that the HOA had no jurisdiction over the river. The HOA's attorney, James Blackfield, argued that the community aesthetic standards gave them authority over all visible areas, including the river. Judge Alina Martinez was not impressed with the HOA's position. "The Willamette River is not subject to HOA regulations," she stated clearly. Mr. Quinn's riparian rights are well established in Oregon law. The lien is ordered removed immediately, and the HOA is to cease all attempts to regulate river usage. It felt like a victory, but it was only the beginning of what would become a much larger legal battle. Within a week of the hearing, the HOA board called an emergency meeting and voted to amend their governing documents to explicitly include the river in their jurisdiction. They also imposed a special assessment on all homeowners, $500 each, to establish a legal defense fund. Many of my neighbors were outraged, especially those who, like me, had purchased their homes specifically for the river access. A group formed the Riverside Property Owners Association, RPOA, to fight the HOA's overreach. I was elected president, which put an even bigger target on my back. In September 2022, Patricia took things to a new level. While I was at work, the HOA hired a contractor to install a fence along the community green space, effectively blocking direct access to the river from the common area. Signs were posted stating "river access by permit only," with an application process requiring board approval and fees. This affected not only me but all residents who enjoyed the river. Families who regularly picnicked by the water, seniors who enjoyed watching the ducks, and kids who fished from the banks were all suddenly cut off from one of the neighborhood's best features. The RPOA consulted with Thomas, who advised us that the fence might actually violate state laws regarding public access to waterways. We filed a complaint with the Oregon State Lands Board, which prompted an inspection. 2 weeks later, a representative from the State Lands Board arrived to examine the fence. Patricia and the board members were there to meet her, insisting that they had the right to control access to the community's private waterfront. The representative, Maria Gonzalez, was thorough in her inspection and clear in her assessment. The Willamette River is a state waterway with public navigation rights. While adjacent property owners have certain riparian rights, no private entity can restrict public access to the river itself. Additionally, this fence appears to encroach on the state-owned portion of the bank. Patricia was indignant. "This is private property. We have the right to secure our community," Ms. Gonzalez remained professional. "The property line ends at the ordinary high water mark. Your fence extends beyond that point in several places, encroaching on state land." The State Lands Board issued a violation notice, requiring the HOA to remove the portions of the fence that encroached on state property and to create a public access point to the river. Rather than comply, the HOA board voted to fight the state's findings. They hired an environmental consultant to contest the high water mark determination and filed an appeal with the state. Meanwhile, tensions in the neighborhood reached a breaking point. Residents were divided, with some supporting the board's efforts to maintain property values and others outraged at the increasing assessments and restrictions. HOA meetings became shouting matches, with Patricia using her position to silence opposition. By November 2022, our lawsuit had expanded to include 15 plaintiffs, all riverfront property owners affected by the HOA's actions. The HOA countersued, claiming we were diminishing property values by fighting necessary community regulations. The case caught the attention of local media, with the Eugene Register Guard running a front-page story titled "River Rights Battle Divides Upscale Community." The publicity brought attention we hadn't expected, including from state officials concerned about the precedent the case might set for waterway access throughout Oregon. In December 2022, the situation took an unexpected turn when an anonymous source provided Thomas with emails between Patricia and a developer named Victor Reynolds. The emails revealed that Patricia had been in discussions with Reynolds about selling the riverfront common area for a small commercial development, a cafe and boat rental facility that would serve the public, but provide kickbacks to the HOA. This explained her sudden interest in controlling river access. It wasn't about aesthetics or property values, it was about preparing for a commercial deal that would benefit the HOA financially while destroying the natural setting that many residents valued. We added these revelations to our lawsuit, now alleging breach of fiduciary duty and fraud. The judge granted our motion for discovery, requiring the HOA to turn over all communications related to the riverfront property. Patricia became increasingly erratic as the pressure mounted. In January 2023, I returned from a business trip to find that someone had vandalized my dock, partially dismantling it and spray painting rules apply to everyone on the remaining boards. I filed a police report and installed security cameras covering my property and dock. Within a week, the cameras caught Barbara Ellis and Gerald Thompson on my property at night, measuring my dock and taking photos. The police issued trespassing warnings to both board members, but no charges were filed since they claimed they were conducting an official HOA inspection and thought they had the right to access all exterior areas of properties. In February 2023, our case finally went to trial. The courtroom was packed with neighbors from both sides of the dispute. Thomas had assembled an impressive case, including testimony from state officials, real estate experts, and legal scholars specializing in property rights and HOA law. Patricia testified for 2 full days, becoming increasingly combative under cross-examination. When Thomas presented the emails about the commercial development deal, she initially denied any knowledge before finally admitting that the board had been exploring options for the common area. The most damning evidence came from the HOA's own attorney, James Blackfield, who was forced to admit under oath that he had advised the board that they had no legal authority over the river, but that they had chosen to assert jurisdiction anyway. After 10 days of testimony, Judge Martinez ruled decisively in our favor. The HOA was ordered to 1. Remove all regulations pertaining to the river. 2. Remove the fence and restore public access. 3. Retract all fines issued for river-related activities. 4. Pay legal fees for all plaintiffs. 5. Issue a formal apology to the community. Additionally, the judge referred the matter to the district attorney's office for potential investigation into the board's misuse of HOA funds and breach of fiduciary duty. It should have ended there, but Patricia wasn't finished. The weekend after the ruling, I took my kayak out early in the morning. As I paddled under the small pedestrian bridge that connected the 2 sections of our neighborhood, something heavy hit the water beside me with a splash. I looked up to see Patricia on the bridge, and another rock came flying down, this time striking my shoulder painfully. "This is all your fault," she screamed. "You've ruined everything." I paddled away quickly as she continued to throw rocks. One hit my kayak, cracking the hull. I called 911 from my cell phone as soon as I was at a safe distance. Officers arrived quickly and found Patricia still on the bridge. She was arrested for assault and criminal mischief. The incident was witnessed by several early morning joggers who provided statements to the police. Patricia was released on bail but ordered to stay away from me and my property. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted to remove her as president, with Gerald Thompson taking over temporarily. The district attorney's investigation uncovered more than we expected. Not only had the board misused funds for their legal fight, but Patricia had also been embezzling from the HOA accounts for years, skimming from maintenance contracts and fabricating expenses. The commercial development deal included a substantial consulting fee that would have gone directly to her. In May 2023, Patricia Winters was charged with embezzlement, fraud, and assault. The other board members faced lesser charges related to misuse of funds and breach of fiduciary duty. The criminal proceedings dragged on through the summer, with Patricia eventually pleading guilty to reduced charges in exchange for restitution. She was sentenced to probation, community service, and ordered to repay over $200,000 to the HOA, but the civil side of our case was far from over. With the criminal elements established, our attorney filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of all 118 homeowners in Oakridge Estates, alleging that the board's actions had damaged property values and that the special assessments had been fraudulently collected. The HOA's insurance company initially denied coverage for the board's actions, claiming they fell outside the scope of normal board duties. This left the individual board members personally exposed to liability. In October 2023, facing personal financial ruin, the remaining board members agreed to a settlement. The HOA's insurance company eventually negotiated a partial coverage agreement and contributed to the settlement, which totaled $3.8 million. The settlement included $1.2 million in compensatory damages to homeowners, $800,000 in legal fees, $1.8 million for restoration of common areas and establishment of a river access park. Each homeowner received approximately $10,000 in compensation. More importantly, the settlement included governance reforms that limited the HOA's authority and established clear boundaries regarding private property rights. The fence was removed, and the common area was restored to its natural state. A small, environmentally sensitive access point was created for community use, with guidelines developed in consultation with state environmental agencies. Patricia Winters sold her home and moved away before the settlement was finalized. Barbara Ellis and Gerald Thompson both resigned from the board, replaced by a new group of neighbors committed to more balanced governance. In January 2024, almost 2 years after that first confrontation with Patricia on my dock, we held a community river celebration day. Nearly 100 neighbors gathered for a potluck by the water. Children played on the banks, seniors sat in lawn chairs enjoying the view, and several kayaks and canoes, including my repaired one, floated peacefully on the Willamette. Thomas joined me on my dock, watching the celebration. "Did you ever imagine a Sunday paddle would turn into all this?" he asked. I shook my head. "I just wanted to use my own property without being harassed. I never expected to lead a revolution." "Sometimes that's how change happens," he replied. "One person stands up, then another, then another." The new HOA president, Marcus Johnson, a retired judge who had bought in Oakridge Estates during the controversy at a discounted price, approached us with glasses of lemonade. The board approved the installation of a small floating dock off the common area, he told me. "We thought it might be nice for residents without river access to have a place to launch canoes or fishing lines. Would you be willing to consult on the design, given your experience?" I smiled, appreciating the irony. "I'd be happy to." As spring 2024 arrived, the changes in Oakridge Estates were visible in more than just the physical landscape. Neighbors who had barely spoken during the conflict were reconnecting. Property values, which had dipped during the turmoil, began to recover as the community's reputation improved. In April, I received a letter from the State Lands Board thanking our community for establishing a model for cooperative management of waterfront property. They were using our case as an example in their outreach to other riverside communities throughout Oregon. Looking back on the 3-year ordeal, I realized that it was never really about a kayak or even about the river itself. It was about power, governance, and the delicate balance between community standards and individual rights. The Willamette still flows past my property, as it has for thousands of years before HOAs existed, and will continue to do long after our disputes are forgotten. I still paddle my kayak regularly, sometimes alone with my thoughts, sometimes with neighbors who have become friends through our shared struggle. Last weekend, I spotted a family of otters playing near my dock, the first I'd seen in years. Perhaps they, too, appreciate that the river belongs to no one and everyone at the same time. The settlement money has been put to good use. Beyond the individual compensation, The community portion funded not only the restoration of the riverfront, but also educational programs about riparian ecosystems for local schools. We established a transparent governance system with term limits and supermajority requirements for major decisions affecting property rights. Patricia Winters, I heard, moved to Arizona. According to former neighbors who still keep in touch with her, she's already running for the board in her new community. Some people never learn. As for me, I've been asked to run for the board next term, but I'm not sure that's my calling. I'm more comfortable advocating from the outside than governing from within. Still, the experience has changed me. I've become more engaged in local issues, more aware of the importance of standing up against abuse of power, no matter how small the context might seem. On summer evenings, I often sit on my deck watching the sunset reflect on the river. Sometimes neighbors wave as they paddle by, a simple gesture that represents the hard-won freedom we now all enjoy. The river continues to flow, indifferent to our human dramas yet somehow central to them. My property extends to the middle of it on paper, but in reality, no one can truly own flowing water. The best we can do is respect it, share it, and protect it for those who come after us. That's the lesson I take from all of this, that some things are worth fighting for, not because they belong exclusively to us, but precisely because they don't. As I look out at the Willamette River today, peaceful and undisturbed, I realize that our 3-year battle was about something much larger than HOA regulations or property rights. It was about the kind of community we want to live in and the values we choose to defend. The $3.8 million settlement made headlines, but the real victory can't be measured in dollars. It's in the children who now play freely by the water, the neighbors who greet each other warmly rather than with suspicion, and the knowledge that sometimes standing your ground can create positive change that extends far beyond your own backyard. My kayak rests on its rack by the dock, ready for tomorrow morning's paddle. No clipboard-wielding HOA president will be there to object, no police will be called, and no fines will be issued. Just the river, the sky, and the freedom to enjoy what's rightfully mine, and in a larger sense, what belongs to all of us. And that, more than any legal victory or financial settlement, is what makes it all worthwhile.